Back with you. Reporting continues now here on In Focus. So we turn to this now. Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister David Mahlobo is leading a delegation at the Stockholm World Water Week conference. It's in Sweden. This year's conference is held under the theme Bridging Borders. Borders are for a peaceful and sustainable future. Now, for more on this, we're joined now by the Deputy Minister who's joining us live from Stockholm. Deputy Minister, good to have you and thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much, Tabo, and a very good evening to all your viewers across the length and breadth of our land and continent.
Why is it important that yourself, your senior officials, and other department entities give support to this particular conference?
We are very pleased that the water community is meeting here in Stockholm. In the main, the world is facing a number of challenges, because if you look at the situation now of the geopolitical tension that continues to escalate, and all these other issues of pandemics, big budgets are being taken away from Sustainable Development Goal number 6 to ensure that a number of people across the globe, including in our own continent, have access to water and decent sanitation. And then this global engagement will provide us a platform that we remain on the main table rather than becoming a menu on the main discussion, because more than a billion people in the world, they still don't have issues of water and decent sanitation. Therefore, we'll look at issues of water security and share our African story, especially in SADC, and how have we cooperated amongst ourselves in terms of the shared water river systems. They are not part of a conflict and we're able to share despite our challenges of issues of climate change that are causing a lot of devastation. But at the very same time, we are going to be making a big call. One of the biggest calls is that there must be financing of water, because if you don't finance water, the issues around electricity generation, which water is the biggest component, issues around food security. Without water, most of the food products that we produce are dependent on that, issues of environment, including issues of national security. As we speak now, the world is not going to be able to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, which is about issues of ensuring that everybody has access to water. Investment, as we speak right now, we should have been investing $1 trillion around the question of ensuring that there is water security. Currently, that has grown to about $7 trillion that we need. In our own country, we should be we're having a gap of more than 37% around water security. In other words, our country should be setting aside by 2030, we should have R1 trillion to deal with issues of water security. But then there's issues of opportunity cost that are being lost. Many people want to invest all over the world. If you can't guarantee issues of water security, energy security, infrastructure, you will have those particular issues that you need to deal with. But those are some of the issues that were coming in here to share with the world and be able to take back some of the innovative solutions to say, how can we improve our governance and our delivery model. But lastly, we're very pleased to be accompanying two students from KwaZulu-Natal in Guadabega. They are the champions from South Africa, from South African Youth Water Prize. They were participating in the International Stockholm Junior Youth Prize this year. They made presentation, the Newzroom twins, which are girls, and we're very pleased that in a Women's Month, young girls doing grade 10, they are dealing with issues of water efficiency and water use, and they are the best ambassadors of our land.
How seriously do these nations and stakeholders take the commitments that they make? For example, if you look at the 2023, this is the UN Water Conference there, you would have had some 700 commitments made in forms of financial pledges, collaborative projects, and actions that would be taken, as you put it, to preserve this precious and irreplaceable resource. Do you see any of those resolutions actually being implemented and being followed through in terms of of pledges. And for example, if we could look at South Africa, what are some of the collaborative projects that we are currently working on with some international partners?
What we could say is that there's been some disappointments. Disappointment in a sense that many countries, they have competing needs, Thabo, and there are also issues of national interest. You could see these bigger countries are spending more money in terms of their military budgets. They are involved in endless conflicts. And the military budgets and the defense industry are the biggest beneficiaries. But then there is a recognition. You remember the question of COVID-19. COVID-19, most of the countries, one of the therapeutic things without using drugs and everything that was covered. The issues of hygiene and sanitation was the most important issue around water. And we are very pleased that these matters, even the G20, which are the top richest countries, they did discuss them. But what they did, there was also even commitment of climate resilient fund, which is most about emissions reduction around issues of green energy. But then they were forgetting the most important component, which is water, because water is the biggest actually multiplier that we're discussing. But in our own country, the attitude of business has been very, very positive. Most of our big bulk infrastructure projects, whether you can count it up in Limpopo, it was not going to be completed using the public purse for the fiscus. That's why there were off-take agreements. The mining sector came on board. Currently, you know, we have our TCTA that is borrowing money in the markets. This is a model that we're actually following so that at least we'll be able not only to rely on public purse, but we'll look at issues of strategic investment in infrastructure, working with partners international, including our delivery mechanism now. That's why we're looking at issues of promoting more concessions, more special purpose vehicles, working with our own institution, so that they can be an investment. On Operation Vulindlela, phase 2 that the president has introduced, will remove all these barriers so that they can't be issues of non-investment. Especially when you look at the green and the blue bonds, you can be able to go to markets and say, you know what, in terms of water use efficiency, dealing with issues of pollution, these are the technologies that we can be able to do, because most of the finance institutions, they have this tendency to say, if you don't actually reduce the waste, we will not be in a position to do those particular investments.
Right.
That's the story that we are carrying. And we met with the African group as African ministers, both in SADC and in the continent, were of the same idea to say, what should we be able to do? We'll also try to engage with His Excellency, our President, when we come back, explore that during his chairpersonship of our country, of G20, the issues of infrastructure, the issues of cooperation around water, we should be able to be one of those beneficiaries. Therefore, there is that particular platform. But we need to keep our voices so that at least the decision makers, including the policy makers and including the practitioners, we don't become, by the way, around issues of development.
Other decision makers in the room, you will remember you and I had the conversation, of course, about Jagersfontein and the tailings dam situation there and the role that the mining companies would have needed to play as far as good practices are concerned. Are they being articulated in a meaningful way, and are they participating meaningfully in all aspects of those discussions?
There is a positive mood, especially when you look at the issues of incentives. You know, using raw water, Thabo, for every other use is not the way to go. Some of these mines, for an example, back at home, they are appreciating the issues of reuse, where, for an example, an effluent from the sewer system, make that example of Ivan plants in the Bombo, is one of the biggest chrome mines in the continent, and the investment is very strong. They are actually saying to a municipality, let's build you a state-of-the-art infrastructure, like a wastewater treatment plant. Your job is to cycle people, then give us the effluent. We can be able to use that effluent. There's that particular issue that we can say is positive. Look at the issue of the mining complex. When you look around the Spukune, until you arrive in Mogalakwena, we did sign up that Olifants River management model, where the mines are contributing 50% of the 26 billion rand and ourselves as a state. So those communities around the plateau, including Peter Mokaba in Polokwane, you come to Kalakwena, they are playing a big role. Those are some of the things that we are showcasing, including what is happening in the Northern Cape, where the mines are contributing close to 10 billion rand. We need to be able to do this other thing. Therefore, we are not just coming here empty-handed, not knowing what we need to do, but there are serious historical issues, like you are saying, of acid mine drainage, the pollution of our groundwater. Every drop of water, whether it's groundwater, we still need it. In Mpumalanga, you can go there. A number of these mines are treating that water to the highest level of quality in terms of mine reclamation. Those are some of the things that we need to be able to do. But non-compliance and pollution, like are happening on the tailing dams, pollution happening in the Vaal River system, the Hartlepool Beersport, we must be able to hit those polluters, because we will not be in a position to pass the burden to the next generation in terms of water security if that water is polluted. Even our agricultural produce, you know, it will be thrown out by the EU here. You know that your World Trade Organization are setting higher standards. If the water is not of good quality, it will impact on food, it will impact on agricultural production, it will impact on the environment and other issues that we need to deal with. And then it will be so expensive to be able to treat water in South Africa. And then the consumer must bear the burden.
Yeah. What does the policy environment looks like? You know, water for climate change policy at national level versus what you're discussing there at a more global level. For example, around things like safeguarding lives with early warning systems.
You know what needs to happen? I was speaking to engineers just about 2 hours ago. I was telling to say the engineers and scientists around the question of planning, around the question of modeling. You remember, you use certain variables where over a period of time you can be able to do some changes. One thing that has happened now, remember, there is increased flooding because it can become very, very hot, and then there's increased issues of droughts. But at the very same time, we are having in the Arctic, you know, those snow heads that are melting. The example of a penguin in the Eastern Cape and somewhere down there, down in the Western Cape, you could see there's a lot of flooding. If you are going to design a bridge or you are designing a water infrastructure, your design structure, the methodology that must be used, it can't remain the same. Therefore, that is the issues of dealing with climate change and issues of mitigation, so you can be able to have early warning system. But that infrastructure must be resilient. But we're also saying that those who are actually doing investment, especially around climate change issues, water is a component of climate change. It can't be gas emissions. When they are actually trying to find, for an example, if someone is going to convert sewer into gas, someone is going to manage the sludge and produce gas, produce fertilizers, can be in a position to use the wastewater for other uses. There must be incentive. There must be a fund that is actually going to promote green energy and renewable aspects that have everything to do with water. Those are some of the issues. Even tomorrow morning, I'll be talking about financing of water security and sustainability. But that cross-cutting issue of climate change will be one of the issues that we will raise. And in our own country, from a policy point of view, there's a room for improvement.
So take us into your presentation a little bit there, because sustainability and water security, others are saying you need to decouple water consumption from economic activity. In other words, the prerequisite would be you need water sustainable ways of production.
It is not going to be easy. For an example, you see leadership. One of the things that is there, take for an example agriculture. Agriculture, we are having irrigators. They need to produce more crops. For a particular crop, you need thousands of liters. For an example, if you are going to have beef that you are exporting, one cow takes thousands of liters to be on a particular size. Therefore, for food security, you will have to be able to understand that there has to be a management where we reduce the consumption. In other words, agriculture at a particular point must find mechanism that they'll be able to produce a feed that will be able to take less water so that they can be able to do the issues of feeding of livestock that is more about meat production. The very same thing, there are issues around certain vegetables, certain crops that we're producing. Those are some of the discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture that we need to be able to do, because in South Africa, agriculture is taking the biggest share, around between 70% to 80%, when the water for other issues is actually a problem. You look at mining as an example, mines are taking a lot of water just for the cooling system underground. When you go for the gold mine, you know that in the gold mine is a little bit longer in terms of being deep. In the cooling system, they need to be able to use water. These are some of the issues that we'll be discussing tomorrow to say, how can we be able to do issues of water efficiency? But the most important issue is to say, every drop that we use, it must be able to count.
Yeah.
Therefore, the question of reuse, the issues of efficiency is an important issue, but you need to deploy certain technologies so that you can be in a position to maximize those particular benefits. But the incentive scheme around those who are doing well, when you look at issues of taxonomics, around issues of tariffs and how our tariffs regime are looking at those particular issues and our investment plan, those are some of the key issues that we will look at.
So deploying technology means money, I mean, essentially. And part of what you're there for is to talk about this issue of finances. So how do you see the broader evolution of multilateral financial institutions, your World Bank and other multilateral development banks? How can they play a role to lead to improved mobilization of capital for water actions?
Remember, there are three sources of funding when it comes to infrastructure and water in particular. There are existing sources. Remember the existing sources, and in terms of financing, one of them is from the public fiscus, which is your treasury that you have. Then there's an issue of contribution from the sales and services of water, where there's a tariff for bulk, there's a retail like you pay me and you. And those ones, we must agree that we must use them very efficient, and we have not been using well. And then the second component is the issue of strategic investment, where you go to private sector, you go to these businesses. That's the element that we're looking at. And the third one, we go to these financial institutions. But these financial institutions, they are always putting conditions. When they put these conditions, some of these conditions, they are very abnormal. You cannot be in a position to meet with them. Therefore, working in terms of SADC, working within the Development Bank in South Africa, including in the continent, is the way to be able to go. Working with our BRICS partners, but also engaging with the EU, including the Western partners, because it's going to be very important. Because at the end of the day, as I was saying, funding for water and infrastructure globally between 5 and 7 trillion US dollars is a backlog that we need to solve the problem by 2030. That is needed on a yearly basis. In South Africa, we need R1 trillion. Therefore, if you don't go to the market, then you have a problem. And you must have a clear business case when we are selling this opportunity to the bankers, that it's a bankable project. There's going to be revenue collection. In other words, the user pay principle will work. But at the very same time, for us to be able to meet those financial components, we must be able to bring water to the element of economic growth. There are certain sectors of our economy that will require water to grow. Then you'll have the off-take agreements that the nation will be able to know that this particular company or this particular sector, they will be able to pay for this water loan that we're taking over the next 15 to 20 years. Yeah. So you don't actually carry this burden to the next generation. Those that are poor, those that are vulnerable, the state must still provide its social security measures in terms of free basic water, but you must be able to have a proper system so that even people must change behavior. This thing that South Africans will behave as if there's a plenty of water, our consumption level per person per day running close to 300 liters like it's happening in Gauteng. That's not the way to go. We'll have to reduce it to around 173, and we'll have to be able to do some civic education so South Africans can be able to say that they can use less water for other activities, not only for the economy. but also for social production.
Yeah. How are you capacitating institutions? I mean, because that would have been my next question. There is a need for water education, clearly, to build capacity, especially when it comes to people. But institutions-wise, what are we doing to certainly bring that capacity of teaching people how to manage water sustainably?
You know, South Africa is well advanced when it comes to institutional framework around water, including capacity building. The only problem we have, we don't have a coordinated approach to ensure that citizens are not left behind, including the ability that we must be able to use indigenous knowledge. Issues of droughts, issues of flooding, issues of overgrazing and so forth, absence of water, the issues of competition and conflict, they were always there. We are having the Water Research Commission right now here. Is led by the best scientists when they have PhDs, they have masters. There are a lot of them. They produce a lot of opportunities, a lot of technologies. But our weakness as a country, they have one of the best sanitation technology for especially non-SWAT sanitation system. But the offtake and the barriers that if your own institution produces that technology, we're unable to use. For an example, I was making the example of these two twins that are doing great in Guatemala, in KZN. In other words, there's a good pipeline that we're doing. But these scientists and engineers, they must be able to raise a voice. They must have an independent mind, show us that the way we manage our resources, both in terms of governance, in terms of financing, in terms of delivery, they must show us a different angle to be able to do that. But we need more water champions in our own country. But we must be able to understand the social, the religious aspects, so that these communities, even in rural communities, in township and villages and affluent areas, they all do feel that there is an opportunity to play. But the education system is the most important center that we can capture young people and change their ability and their relationship with water.
Somebody could be listening to us and saying, you know, these ministers of South Africa, they like going to these international forums, including your COP, and they go there and then they sign and then they tie us up to all sorts of things around how to produce energy efficiently. Now, here's Deputy Minister Mahlobo talking about efficient use of water when we are struggling here in South Africa in terms of water sources. Member states that are there, of course, will sign up to all sorts of things. When they come to you, DM, and they say, where is South Africa sitting now as far as shifting to green and blue economies when it comes to water? What will you tell them?
I would want to indicate, for an example, when it comes to blue and efficiency around water, let's take, for an example, the issue, Tabo, of how pollution and the deterioration of water quality, it's a global problem. In our own country, as we speak right now, most of our wastewater systems, they are overcapacitated because someone never planned for the growth in population and expanded the infrastructure. Our infrastructure doctrine was not correct. There are too many houses are connected. We never did this, then there's pollution. But go down to KwaZulu-Natal in Maritzburg. When you go down to Maritzburg, there's a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment work, of which His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, we went there. The first thing that you will find is that because it's managed well by one of our best institutions, Newzroom Water Board, you go there, it is odorless. You will not be able to feel the smell when you are coming from a long distance. In other words, the operations and the processing is going well. When you arrive in the plant, that plant is able to treat effluent to a particular standard that it could be used by other people for other uses, not only for drinking water. They even release water of good quality to Umgeni system so that the municipalities downstream, they don't actually use more money to treat the water that is polluted. Like you see the problem of Madibeng because Artis is more polluted. Then there's a sludge. That particular sludge, they're able to prepare it well, manage it well, create the beds. Then they are able to burn the sludge. When they burn the sludge, they are actually starting a process of producing energy in terms of that particular gas. A 1 megawatt, which is a very serious amount of electricity that they will be able to generate for themselves. But some of the sludge is being used to produce issues of compost, so you can have fertilizers. You could see how that particular system, if it is managed well, it produces a circular economy. There's issues of electricity, management of the waste around water, reuse of that particular water. You can still do the same in Johannesburg. You can go to Johannesburg, there's a Northern Works there. It's so smelly, it produces about 400 million liters just per day in terms of treatment. If they can be able to reuse agriculture around those outskirts of Gauteng there in Johannesburg, whether you look in the valley, those are some of the issues that Thabo, we must be able to migrate to, because we don't have sufficient money to build more dams. We must still build them so that when it rains, we capture water. Right. But more than 70% of surface water is being used. Groundwater in the main is still unexplored. There are many areas where we need to develop it, but there is no infrastructure. There is a pollution because of settlement. People are building houses there, doing too many boreholes. The pit toilets that are there, we are polluting water. Therefore, reuse and recycling is some of the things that the country must move on. In Mpumalanga, for an example, the pollution that is done by the mines, whether in terms of sulfates, whether the iron and all those that are there, those mines around Middelburg and Witbank, they are able to do recycling and reclamation of mine water to a higher standard that can be used by themselves. In other words, taking more water from the system that is already under pressure by the mining industry is one of the examples. And the others, they are selling it to Emalahleni, they are selling it to Steve Tshwete, which is Middelburg. Those are some of the things that we should be able to proceed as a country and be decisive about them, so that we can be able to conserve water for the next generation.
Deputy Minister, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for engaging us. Deputy Minister there, David Mahlobo, he is in Sweden for the 2024 Sweden Water Conference. Right.